welcome to Travel Memories at Red Deer Public Library. Today, our speakers are coming to us from their homes in Red Deer and Calgary. So this is the advantage of doing it online for all of us, just to stay in the comfort of our homes and still share our travel adventures. So today we have Anita and Jane, and they have talked twice before for our Travel Memories group. The first time was an all-female trip in Nepal, and the second time was a hike in Japan. And they were very popular talks, so we're really looking forward to hearing about what they did in Scotland. So you can, if you have some questions or comments, you can do that in the comments section on Facebook Live. And at the end of their talk, if you have some questions there, I will ask Anita and Jane, and they can hopefully come up with some good answers. They tell me they're going to introduce themselves, so I don't have to say much more. Okay.
Well, then, good afternoon. I'm Anita Thomas, and this is my sister-in-law, Jane Goddard. We're hikers, and we're hikers who like long-distance walking holidays. As Priscilla said, we're at home, and we're sharing the presentation, and Jane has control over the slides, so we may be prompting each other as we go through the presentation. We started doing long distance holidays together in 2007. And since then, well, we've had a lot of fun on the trails. This is our long distance hiking resume. And as Priscilla said, we presented on Nepal and we presented on the Kumano in Japan. And now we're sliding in the Great Glen Way that we did in 2007. We usually learn about different hikes when we're walking because we hear about it from other people. We actually heard about the Great Glen Way when we were doing the Coast to Coast Trail in England. An Australian family told us that because the trail follows a waterway from one sea to the other, we could walk one way and rent a houseboat and float back. So we were very intrigued. You know, that sounded like a really neat thing to do. Well, it wasn't actually all that easy because yes, you can rent a houseboat, but you have to take it back to where you got it. So you couldn't just float one way. Nonetheless, by then we were committed to this particular hike. It had the things we look for. We look for a hike that has a start and a finish rather than just sort of plunking down in the middle somewhere. And we look for one with accommodation along the route and hopefully luggage transfer as well.
So once we had landed on the Great Glen Way as the walk that we wanted to do, the first thing we have to do is figure out when we're going to head out on this walk. And we like to miss the high travel season. So when kids are out of school and families are traveling. So we generally try to go either in the spring or in the fall. And when we're heading over to the UK, we've had quite a bit, to the UK, we've had quite a bit of luck in September. So we've managed to miss most of the rain and have some really beautiful days and less crowded trails. We do generally use a service to help us book all of our accommodation. And that's because it's a lot of work if we're having to send over deposits to all the different places we're going to stay on our walking holiday and kind of manage all that. And especially when you go on a walking holiday in the UK, there's a lot of companies who are set up to help you out with that. The other thing that we get when we use a booking agency to help us get all of our accommodation locked in, is they generally are able to arrange for our luggage transfer. So we like to do the walk just with a day pack and then have one suitcase moved every day to our next accommodation. In order to book all of our accommodation, we have to determine how far we're going to walk each day. That's somewhat controlled by where the next hotel or lodge or inn or B&B is going to be. But we generally like to walk between 12 and 20 kilometers a day. So once we know where we're ending each evening, we start picking our accommodation. And that's something that Anita does most of the work on. And she does a great job of getting us all sorts of different accommodations. So we'll do B&Bs. If there's the option in any of the places we're stopping to stay on a farm, that's something we really like to do. And we like to mix it up. So not all the same accommodation on any given trip, or same type of accommodation on any given trip. For this trip over to Scotland, as well as doing a hiking holiday, we had a few other activities set up. It's a pretty easy flight from Calgary to Glasgow right now, or it was pre-COVID. So we were able to go Halifax to Glasgow, and we flew in and out of Glasgow for this trip. So being able to fly straight to Scotland or straight to where we're going to do our walking holiday is always really nice. From Glasgow, we were able to have a quick day to hit the highlights in Glasgow. And then we took a train to Fort William. Fort William is not only our launching off part or location for the Great Glen Way, but it's also beside Ben Nevis. And Ben Nevis is a mountain in Scotland that we also wanted to climb. So there was a bit of synergy in planning this trip to Scotland and being able to tick off on our list, both a climb up Ben Nevis and a walking holiday. So we had one extra day to climb Ben Nevis, and then we would start the Great Glen Way. We would walk for 5 days and end in Inverness. And from Inverness, we had decided we wanted to get to the Orkney Islands, which are just off mainland Scotland in the most northeasterly part of Scotland, and do some touring there, and then have a quick visit in Edinburgh, and we'd have to head back to Glasgow in order to fly home. So that was the whole outline of the trip we'll be speaking about today. So just to help you all understand what we planned and how we made this happen, you can see the capital of Scotland is Edinburgh, and not too far away from it is Glasgow, and it was Glasgow that we would fly into. There's Ben Nevis on the map is looking straight northwest of Glasgow, and that's also where Fort William is. And then we would walk from where the map shows Ben Nevis up a geological fault all the way to Inverness. And you could see one of the highlights of our trip, Loch Ness, is identified on this map. And then if you look to the north part of mainland Scotland, then you'll see the Orkney Islands just off that point of land. And From the Orkneys, we would come back to Edinburgh and then a quick bus ride back to Glasgow to fly home. I've already used one very specific Scottish word, and that is ben. And ben means mountain. So in Canada, we would say Mount Nevis, but in Scotland, they say Ben Nevis. Other Scottish words that relate to this specific holiday, a glen is a valley, and a loch is a lake. And we would walk past 3 lochs on this trip. We would also walk past lochs, where between the natural bodies of water, boats are raised and lowered in order to continue through the canal, which today joins the 3 lochs that are part of our walk. You'll notice on the map, in the picture, or pardon me, on the directional place finder on the picture, that several of the towns we walked through are identified. And I have to say that my Scottish pronunciation of some of these locations won't necessarily be accurate. So I'll do my best that I can. So I did say that we started with a quick day in Glasgow. We arrived at about 8 in the morning UK time and made our way from the airport, found our B&B, and then decided, you know, if you're going to be in Scotland for a walking holiday, you should get started right away with a walking tour in Glasgow. So our guide for our one-day walking tour in Glasgow is the very nice university student in the middle of these 3 pictures. She did a great job taking us through historical Glasgow. She was our guide for almost 4 hours and just really got us through the highlights. I really feel like I did justice to Glasgow, or we did justice to Glasgow. In the picture, she has a can of Erin Brew, which is a local pop or soda, for lack of a better word. It is a brilliant orange color and quite highly caffeinated. And she had us all sample it. And I did not have any additional Erin Brew while I was in Scotland. So in our tour of Glasgow, we did see the Duke of Wellington statue, and there is a traffic cone on that statue's head. It's not part of the original statue, but apparently there is always a traffic cone on that statue. And the other picture on this particular slide is of Dalton Fountain on Glasgow Green. And the sculpture at the bottom of this fountain is a sculptor's view of Canada. So it was quite amusing to see because there's actually a moose cuddled into the man and woman representing Canada on the fountain.
So as Jane said, we added a climb up Mount Nevis, or Ben Nevis. As we've already said, the Great Glen Way starts at the western coast of Scotland at Fort William. Now, Ben Nevis is a really famous mountain. It's the highest in the British Isles, and it's just over 1,300 meters. So if you were to compare that to our Rockies here in Alberta, it doesn't sound that high. But when you're starting at sea level, it's a tough climb. and it's often quite steep. The trail up Ben Nevis is extremely popular. Often there's over 500 people who climb it in a day. And the day that we were there, there was a steady line going up and going down. The trail is all made of rough stone steps. It was at one time a pony trail. They had a pony train that would take supplies up to an observatory at the top. The observatory is now in ruins, but the stone steps remain. So it's an easy trail to follow. You can't get lost. We were warned through signage at the bottom and other documents that about the weather. Ben Nevis is known for very changeable weather, cold winds. It can rain or snow at any month of the year. There are steep cliffs at the top that you could walk off in a dense fog. And so we were prepared. We had toques and gloves and wool sweaters and raincoats and rain ponchos. And I can tell you, we've hiked a lot in Alberta and we have never been this cold. It was frigid, but we started back down again, the sun came out, and it was glorious. Okay, I thought it was Jane's turn, but maybe it's mine. So this is just a map of the Great Glen Way, which is the trail from Fort William to Inverness. And as you can see, it's 124 kilometers long. We chose to do it in 5 days. You could do it in more or less. It follows that natural fault line you can see on the map of Scotland. It's like a large geological cleft. And the Caledonian Canal connects the 3 lakes on the walk. We walked it. You can drive it. You can paddle it. And you can bike it. So it's perhaps one of the most accessible routes in Scotland or in the UK.
So what we thought we would do with our talk today is use some of the highlights of the Great Glen Way to try and explain what a walking holiday is like and why you might want to choose this type of a holiday. So here we are, kicking off the hike. The Great Glen Way was brought together as a signed trail in 2013. And it's made up of many existing trails. And now there is a specifically signed route that takes you from Fort William at the start of this geological fault that Anita described and takes you to the northeast corner of it at the end point in Inverness. So we are taking a very specific marked route through quite a few different existing trails that make up or that happen in this area. So it has a very specific beginning, and we're here in this picture at that beginning. And we made a point of actually starting exactly where the walk starts, just because I think that's kind of fun to have a very specific beginning and end. So you'll see that, sorry, I'm just gonna switch slides. A lot of this trail follows the Caledonian Canal, and there's 3 lochs. There's Loch Lochy, Loch Oich, and Loch Ness. And I think of the 3, it might only be Loch Ness that everyone is familiar with. In between is a man-made canal, the Caledonian Canal, And so there's very nice, wide pathways on both sides of the Caledonian Canal. And they're not there specifically for walking the Great Glen Way, but the route that the Great Glen Way takes advantage of these existing pathways. Right here is a lock on the canal. So this is where a boat comes into a small defined space, and the water is either raised or lowered in this space so that the boat can move up the canal. And there was quite a lot of boat traffic when we were walking alongside the canal. There was even a very small cruising boat, which moved locations at night so that every day their passengers could spend the day walking or biking in the area. So lots of, as Anita said, lots of different ways to move on this route. It's a very easy route in that it's flat. You're very close to civilization. So if you decided you didn't want to complete your walk on any given day, there's lots of easy ways to get to your next location. And because the walk itself was basically flat, there is a highland route that happens on this walk. And we did take the option of getting slightly away from the immediate waterway and into the forest to really explore the countryside. One of the really nice things about doing a distance walk is that you'll often start on the same day as other random people who are doing the same walk. And you really have an opportunity to become very best friends for a very short time. And you'll frequently sit together at the pub for dinner, or you'll wave when you pass each other every day. And it's kind of very special time, even though you may only be best friends for a very short time. So our first morning on the hike, we stopped for coffee and ran into two young Canadians who were actually canoeing the route. Now, unlike many of our other hiking holidays, we did not walk at the same time for the same route with any other walkers. We did see a couple of walkers more than one time, but they were taking advantage of this trail in a different method. There was at least two ladies that we saw quite regularly while we were doing this walk who were staying at a B&B for the entire time, and their husbands were ferrying them to and from their end and start points on a daily basis. So it was pretty quiet on the trail, and actually that was quite a wonderful experience as well. As I said, we like to stay in a different accommodation. Well, we have to stay in a different accommodation because we're moving every night, but we like to stay in different types of accommodation. And this is one of the B&Bs we stayed in. We also stayed in a couple of lodges, which generally means that dinner is available in a dining room within our nighttime accommodation. Otherwise, we are off to pubs in the evening, and if there aren't other hikers to talk to, we generally get to have a great conversation with the locals at the pubs.
Part of the fun of walking holidays is the little things that you see along the way, like this little food and drink stand. The farmer would put out a price list, a jar for coins, maybe water bottles, maybe individually wrapped cookies, that kind of thing. And as we mentioned, of course, we walked along the iconic Loch Ness, which is 36 kilometers long. So therefore, we were walking beside it for about 2 days. It's a very deep lake by volume, the largest in the British Isles. And when we got to Drum, and that's what the locals call this community, and so therefore that's what we call it, we found that there was all you want to know about the Loch Ness Monster, you can learn here. You can go to Nessieland and learn about the history of monster sightings that apparently go back for hundreds of years. You can buy all kinds of souvenirs and so on. But this is as close as we got to the Loch Ness Monster. The lake was very flat and quiet the whole time we walked along it. Because we were walking generally under 6 hours a day, we always had time to explore the attractions along the route. And this is the ruins of one of the great historic Scottish castles, Urquhart, that goes back into the Middle Ages. And so we had a great afternoon exploring these ruins. People come from all over just to see this castle.
So I mentioned that, or we've shown you a picture of when we're walking against the canal. And then this is our view as we're walking along one of the lochs. And I'm not 100% sure if this was Loch Ness or not, but this is our scenery as we're going along. Because we were walking the high route, we also got to be on some fabulous trails through the forest. We were, for the most part, hiking on our own when we were on these forest trails. It's kind of quite a interesting feeling because you feel all alone, but you're only a couple of kilometers away from a village. So it's quite a nice way to get into the forest, but not to be at all isolated or at all worried about, you know, making your way home or running into strangers. It's all very safe and just quite wonderful to have the experience on our own, or to feel that we were having it on our own. So the trail is quite, as we've said, remote, but there's really some charming little parts to this trail. And on the right-hand side of the photo, you are looking at the Troll Bridge. And there was all kinds of wonderful little surprises like this as we made our way on the route. One of the little surprises we ran into was this lovely cafe we came upon right on the route. We were in the Abriachan forest and came right across the Abriachan Eco-Cafe. This is an off-grid cafe. It's open 365 days of the year. And this charming husband who's in the picture there with us and his wife run this cafe / pie shop on their own. They do all their own baking right on premises. And the husband of the team takes a picture of everybody who comes to the cafe and posts your picture on his Facebook page. So while we didn't feel like we had many people with us when we were hiking the highlands, when we got to the cafe, we were surprised to see how many people were just 5 minutes ahead of us or 10 minutes behind us. So it was really fun to stop and visit here.
As we got to the eastern end of the trail, we were crossing some Scottish moors. Now, if you're not familiar with the moors, they're uncultivated land that's covered in grass and heather. The soil is peaty, boggy, acidic, and doesn't really support many trees. And it's also an area that can be very cold and windy. The wind can roar in off the North Sea. So it was wonderful to find that there were sheltered benches like this one, which was beautifully designed, where we could stop and have a little rest and maybe have our lunch. At one point on the moors, we came across this wooden sculpture that the sign said it was framing a view. But we were in the Scottish mist at this point, and we didn't see the view. We did admire the sculpture. When we got to the end of the trail at the east coast, we were in the city of Inverness, and the end of the trail sign happens to be right across the road from a pub. I mean, how fortuitous is that? So of course, we went to the pub to have a pint to celebrate. And we'd also learned that this pub would give us a little free certificate for acknowledgement of our walk.
So Inverness was the end of our walking holiday. Not that we don't walk a lot when we're not on a specific trail, but we had decided when we were going to pay for tickets to come over to Scotland for this walking holiday that we wanted to add a place we'd both never been. And so we landed on the Orkney Islands. So the Orkney Islands are just off that tip of Scotland, and I mentioned that before, but we have another picture here, and that larger island in that cluster of islands that make up the Orkneys is called the mainland. And I, for one, found that quite amusing. And that is where we were headed. And to get there from Inverness, we had to take the local bus and make our way, stopping in every small town and sometimes at farm gates to drop people off or pick people up. And it really was quite a non-touristy experience. We had two lovely old Scottish ladies sit behind us and sing hymns for the time that they were on the bus ride with us. And it was just a really unique experience, I think, having the opportunity to get on the local bus. So we made our way all the way to the ferry terminal and headed over. It's not a very long ferry ride to Stromness on the Orkney Islands. And the Orkney Islands are fascinating, fascinating place to visit. They have been inhabited for the longest time. And I think that it might be because the climate is so mild. So the temperature on the Orkney Islands stays between -10 and +10, 365 days of the year. So it's a very temperate climate. There's almost no trees. The trees on the island got used a long time ago. So it's quite flat. There's mainly agriculture on this mainland island that we were on. There's two main cities, but outside of the city, it's immediately very rural feeling. You would see sheep, you would see all kinds of agriculture taking place, and just quite a wild and windswept environment.
Orkney has several World Heritage Neolithic sites. I think there's 4, and we visited 2, one of which was the Ring of Brodgar. This is a stone circle that is assumed to be from 2500 BC. The area has never been fully excavated, so the date is somewhat uncertain. We'd actually rented a car in Orkney so we could get around. And it was easy because within minutes you're on the other side of the island, but it was difficult because they drive on the wrong side of the road over there still. And so it takes some concentration. So we just, followed the map with the road map, found a little sign on the highway to the Ring of Brodgar, drove over there. There was no gate. There's no entrance fee. There's no concession sign. And in fact, when we were there, there was no one else. So we were able to walk around these ancient stones, which are in a complete circle, by ourselves. And it was almost like going back in time. Really quite mystical. The other place that we went was Skara Brae, which is the most complete Neolithic village in Europe. The site was completely covered by sand until a wicked storm blew in the mid-1800s and uncovered part of the site. And since then, it's been excavated on 2 occasions. There are 8 dwellings that are connected by covered stone passageways. So you can see on the right-hand side, this is one of the dwellings. All of the dwellings had exactly the same configuration, sort of shelves or shelving or a cupboard built of stone along one wall, a fire pit in the middle, and what may have been beds or enclosures on either side. And we also spent quite a bit of time in Kirkwall, which is the major town. It's an ancient Norse town that was settled about 1,000 years ago. I believe the population is about 8,000 people. One of the main attraction, and certainly a very significant cathedral, is St. Magnus, the oldest medieval church in Scotland. It dates from the 12th century. It is a Norse cathedral, and it's built of red and yellow sandstone and is really very impressive. Inside and out. Inside, there are many monuments, there are plaques, a lot of historical material. I'm sure you could spend days there, and you can have a guided tour of the cathedral. On the right-hand side is one of the monuments that particularly interested us. This was a monument to John Rae, who was a physician. He trained as a surgeon at Edinburgh, and then he became an Arctic explorer with the Hudson's Bay Company. And you see his monument shows him reclining, presumably in the Canadian Arctic, with his blankets thrown over him and his gun at his side. We didn't show you any pictures of Kirkwall's main street, but there's lots of shopping. You can shop for hand-knit woolens and there's quite a few jewelry shops that carry the work from local designers. When we travel, we always like to leave time for, we don't like to plan a holiday too tight. We always read the local tourist publications or go to the local tourist office and find out what we can do and what we can see. So we learned about an evening of storytelling in a rural cottage. And we decided actually to take a taxi because it was dark. As you might imagine, it gets dark early in September in the Orkney Islands. So we hired a taxi and went a few kilometers out of town to this cottage, which had a very traditional room with slate floors and an open fire. And our hostess, this was her business, burned a peat fire and with great drama told us some old Scottish legends about the Silkies. The Silkies were mythical creatures who could change their form from being seals to humans. It was a lot of fun. And, you know, even the taxi driver, I mean, it's sort of Scottish hospitality. She drove us out to this cottage and she said, well, you'll be done in 2.5 hours, so I'll be back to pick you up. And, you know, she was right. We were done in 2.5 hours and there she was, back to pick us up.
So since we were in Scotland and early on in the tour, we decided that we should really be doing our own Scotch tasting event. And every evening in the pubs, we would try a Scotch. There's all kinds of different Scotches. And at one of the pubs, we got this fabulous brochure that helped us navigate all the different tastes and types of Scotches out there. But it wasn't until we were on the Orkneys that we actually did a Scotch distillery tour. So we went to the Skara distillery, which is the most northerly Scotch distillery in Scotland, and took part in their tour and got to sample all their different Scotches and left with our free souvenir Scotch glass, and just really made sure that we took as much knowledge as we could about Scotch drinking from the locals. When it was time to leave the Orkneys, we had to be on the 6 a.m. sailing to the mainland. It's one sailing a day type of event. And when we were at the ticket office for the ferry, buying our tickets to get off the island, the person selling us the tickets let us know that we could actually sleep on the ferry the night before the sailing. And I've already mentioned that we like to try all different kinds of accommodation. So this just sounded perfect to us. And you're looking at a picture of the berth that we had on the boat. And it's kind of amusing that we got to sleep all night before a 40-minute ferry ride. But the best part was not worrying about getting to the boat in time for it to leave. So it really fit the bill for us. From when we got back to mainland Scotland, we took a bus to Edinburgh and had a bit of time to tour Edinburgh. And as people who go on walking tours do, we did an awful lot of walking. So on the left-hand side, we're at Arthur's Seat in Holyrood Park. And, or sorry, that was the left-hand side where you could see us. And on the right-hand side, we're on Calton Hill, where there's all kinds of interesting monuments that we got to walk by. What really helped us navigate most of Edinburgh, and I'm sure lots of you have taken advantage of this kind of transportation, is we totally got our money's worth from the hop on, hop off sightseeing bus in Edinburgh. And we really touristed it up. And here are pictures of us taking advantage of some of the touristy things to do on the Royal Mile. So I'm paying to get my picture taken with Piper, and Anita paid to help feed the owl that she's holding in that picture. So after Edinburgh, it was another bus trip to Glasgow and home from our Scottish holiday.
Well, that was wonderful. I want to go like yesterday.
Maybe next year.
Okay, wait a little while.
Wait a while.
So I do have some questions. So you went in September.
Yes.
Would you go back in September? Okay, I should step back. Would you go back again?
To Scotland?
Yes.
Oh, there's at least 10 long distance walks we haven't done.
Okay. So you wouldn't go, if you were to go back, would you pick that same month though, is I guess where I was going with it, because it seemed less busy to me, but then I expect it would have been in summer.
I think spring is another lovely time to go, and fall is reputedly a little drier, and it can rain a lot in Scotland. It is an island. Of course, the British Isles are an island. So we, like to avoid downpours if we can.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, and it's really nice to have, as much as it's nice to have the experience of being with other people, it really feels like you get to know the locals when it's quiet like that.
So your pictures are just lovely. Did you use a special camera, or did you use your cell phones, or what?
Just one of those point and shoots.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we first started looking at our pictures, I was very much, didn't think they really were of a good enough caliber for this presentation. But once we got them into the PowerPoint, even going through it today, it was lovely to see some of the greens and some of the skies that we experienced. So even with our point and shoots, our pictures weren't terrible.
And Scotland is very beautiful. We were walking right on the edge of the Highlands, so it is very spectacular scenery.
So did you get any other interesting souvenirs besides your free Scotch glass?
Oh yes, we bought jewelry in the Orkneys. What else did we buy? I spent a long time buying a cashmere stole in Edinburgh. That was, yeah. What did you buy, Jane?
I bought earrings on the Orkneys, and I brought home a mug. That's my travel souvenir. I like to try to bring home a coffee mug, but not a lot of souvenir, although I feel like both on the Orkneys and in Edinburgh, we were in a lot of souvenir stores, but not a lot came home.
In fact, these are my Orkney Island earrings. They're kind of hard to see, but they're a Celtic kind of design.
So you mentioned that you tried haggis, but you didn't say whether you liked it or not.
Haggis to me tasted like a very spicy dressing, and something that is fine in a small quantity. Not as a main course, at least not for me. When we asked the locals about haggis, I was wondering if people actually, ate haggis, and they said, oh yes, they did. But they said that had to buy it from a butcher who knew how to make it well. And so we never talked to anybody who made their own. People would say, oh yes, but we would only get it from such and such a place where it was spiced just right.
And Anita was significantly braver than me with haggis. I agreed to have 1 spoonful to meet the criteria of having tasted it. And it does taste like, you know, Christmas turkey dressing.
Sort of.
But it's very rich for me.
Our most fun was, yeah,
go ahead.
Our most fun was Scotch tasting.
Yeah.
So you tried lots of pints too. Did you have a favorite beer or ale or?
Well, it was kind of fun. The pubs we went to tended to serve you a half pint with a whiskey chaser, and we kind of got into that.
Feeling, of course, that we had earned it after our hard day walking.
So any trolls under the bridge?
No, but it was just wonderful. You really did feel that on any given day you could run into a troll for sure.
Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious why so much folklore comes out of Scotland, because it's kind of a mystical place. I think it has to do with the mist and that blows in, and you could believe in a lot of things when you're there.
You too, Jade?
Yeah, it was really quite special. And even, you know, even on those really misty days, it just has a very special feel to it.
So you mentioned the one fellow with the pie shop. Did you meet any other local characters that have stuck in your memory?
Definitely the couple that did the talk, that we went to their home on the Orkneys. Their home was decorated like peat houses used to be, and the wife was more of the presenter, but they really were into their history and their traditions. And I don't know if you noticed in the picture, but they'd even drawn on their walls some of the main characters from the stories she would tell.
Another thing we did that we didn't really mention is our last day of walking, the trail was about 30 kilometers with no accommodation. So what we did, and this worked out really well, we contacted a taxi driver and we stayed in our B&B, and then we walked halfway, 15 or so kilometers, and we'd arranged for a taxi to meet us and come and pick us up, and she took us back to our B&B, and then the next morning she drove us back to the same point and dropped us off, and we walked the rest of the way, because we actually could walk 30 kilometers in a day, but we didn't want to. It would have taken a little of the fun out of it.
Well, it sounds like you two have this down to a science, just making the best of wherever you go. Anything that you would do differently?
Well, it would have been lovely to take the 12-hour ferry and go to the Shetland Islands. That would have added a few more days, but yes, on another trip, for sure.
You, Jane, would you have done anything differently?
I don't think so. I think the Great Glen Way is a little shorter than we would normally walk, where most of our other walking holidays have been closer to 10 days. So the nice thing about it being shorter is it left time for us to do a little bit more exploring than we normally would. So, you know, there's always that give and take with how long you stay on one route limits the rest of your stay. we're generally trying to do these holidays in 2 to 3 weeks.
So it seemed less rugged than maybe your other hikes that you shared with us. Is that true, or just sometimes it's hard to tell in pictures how rugged a hike is?
It was definitely less rugged and less strenuous than most of the other hikes we've done. So, you know, for comparison, we did a hike in Switzerland that was 200 kilometers long, and we had to do a total elevation gain and loss of 10,000 meters. So that was 1,000 meters a day. So that's climbing a mountain every day for 10 days. And this was not anywhere near as strenuous, but that doesn't make it less special. It's, you know, it's not about how far or how high. It's about every experience is unique and equal. Would you agree, Jane?
Yeah, like I liked this hike quite a bit. It was very easy to do, and I think it would be a great starting point for anybody who wanted to explore a walking holiday, because you really could just come from Alberta and start walking and you would do just fine. Where some of our other walking holidays, we've had to put a lot of effort into getting into shape in order to do the walk. So, you know, there was something just nice and easy about this one that worked well for us.
So yes, if you could walk across Red Deer, you could do this walking holiday.
So that's a question I just received, was what was your average distance to walk each day while doing the Great Glen Way? Was there
the actual average, like mathematical average, is 17.5 kilometers a day. But generally we either walk 12 kilometers or 20 kilometers. There didn't seem to be a lot of difference in the actual kilometers. And it was, so 174 in 5 days is where I got the 17.5.
Well, I think I can say that we're all inspired by this trip that you took, and it was great that you shared it with us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, our pleasure.
And I hope that everybody will join us next month when we get to go to India. It's colorful, unique, fertile country filled with friendly, hardworking people. Contrast between rich and poor, ancient and modern, rural and urban makes this a fascinating destination and probably a good choice for December. So thank you again very much. And we'll hope to see you all next month.
Okay, thank you.